Good evening. I'm meteorologist Matthew Euler, and welcome to tonight's Teleconnections discussion for the 8th of January 2021. And there is a lot to discuss in tonight's Teleconnections, so let's get right into it. All right, first of all, like I do in every video, I go ahead and show the Madden-Julian oscillation, the MJO, the phases correlate to phases 1 through 8. And you'll see that here in a moment on the actual MJO diagrams, the RMM, and the areas of enhanced convection associated with each of these MJO phases. So, for example, let's say we're in phase 8 on the MJO forecast of the diagram. We would tend to correlate that with convection there in the equatorial Pacific in the vicinity of the international date line, 180 degrees west longitude. Let's say there's convection in the Indian Ocean. That would favor the MJO phases 2 and 3. What about 4 and 5 would be in the vicinity of Australia. There'd be enhanced convection in that case there. So this is a great representation of the different MJO phases and where the areas of enhanced convection occur in the equatorial waters. So let's take a look. A reminder there on the left. Let's take a look at the MJO forecast. Now, the temperature composites for January, February, and March are on the left. The orange shading represents above normal temperatures associated with phases 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then the blue shading represents below normal temperature departures, colder air, associated with phases 8, 1, 2, and 3. So let's take a look at the diagram on the right. That's the Gfs Ensemble Forecast for the MJO. And this forecast runs out from today, the 8th of January, on out for about 2 weeks to the 22nd of January 2021. The green line represents the overall average of the ensembles. And you'll notice that the green line in this particular forecast is generally associated, the coloring there, the shading, the line is in phase 3, which would indicate enhanced convection in the Indian Ocean. Let's see numbers 2 and 3 there, associated with enhanced convective activity in the Indian Ocean. And so the forecast off the Gfs Ensemble is for the MJO. Initially, you'll notice it's in the smaller little inner circle, and then it goes into more of the weak phase 3 through the 22nd of January. And you look at the graphic on the left again, the temperature composites for the months of January, February, and March. And you'll notice phase 3 has blue shading across the eastern United States. Pretty much most of the United States is covered with blue shading with an MJO in phase 3. So that's a colder look. GFS operational MJO forecast, pay attention to the aqua color line there. Generally, again, very similar to the GFS Ensemble, with the MJO generally forecast to be into a weak phase 3, and then moving up closer to null phase once more, out through the 22nd of January. Moving ahead to the La Nina update, taking a look at the overall sea surface temperature anomaly, degrees Celsius on the left. Blue shading is correlated with below normal water temperatures, orange shading with above normal water temperatures. And you'll notice again how the blue shading tends to stick out across the equatorial eastern Pacific, and it stretches right along the equator past the 180 degree west longitude line, past the date line, into the West Pacific. So we do still show signs of La Nina, as indicated by this diagram in the blue shading. There are above normal water temperatures generally north of Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands, on up off the Pacific Northwest, coast of Washington, Oregon, and then down off Northern California. And meanwhile, over on in the Atlantic side, off of North America, we have above normal water temperatures in the vicinity of Nova Scotia, for example, and eastern Canada. The graphic on the right, that shows the blue line represents where the temperature departures have been generally going back to early October. Generally showing that we had a pretty significant drop-off in the water temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region. Generally around Halloween, it reached its coldest level, 1.6 degrees Celsius below normal, below climatological normal levels. And then you'll notice how the temperatures warmed in the Nino 3.4 region right around November 13th to the 15th, that blue line kind of goes back up, and it basically results in a 1 degree Celsius below normal temperature departure around mid-November. And now take a look how the blue line is steadied out from December 11th to the day's date, January 8th. Look how the blue line is fairly steady, sitting about 1 degree Celsius below normal in the equatorial eastern Pacific in that Nino 3.4 region. So right now we're really on that border between, we're at 0.98 degrees Celsius below normal water temps in the Nino 3.4 region. Generally, we've had steady temperatures in the water there over the past week. And we're generally situated on the border between a weak La Nina, which is 0.5 to 0.9 degrees Celsius below normal, versus a moderate La Nina, which would run from a -1 to about -1.4. So we're right around -1 right now. So right there on that border between weak and moderate La Nina. Moving ahead now to the Arctic Oscillation Forecast. Now let's take a look at these teleconnections. This is really, really interesting. These play such a large role in the winter weather forecasts. So let's go right into it. Now, I'll get much more in depth as we go along here. The Arctic Oscillation, the AO, if you look at the graphic on the left, the negative Arctic Oscillation, and then the graphic on the right is a comparison to the positive Arctic Oscillation. So what happens is, between the negative and positive phases, there's a significant difference between, for example, the jet stream configuration. On the left with a negative Arctic Oscillation, we tend to have a much more amplified polar front jet stream, and so that allows Arctic air to spill from the Hudson Bay Polar Vortex and the weakening Polar Vortex. A lot more Arctic air can shift from Canada down into the eastern United States with a negative Arctic Oscillation. With a positive Arctic Oscillation, look at the difference. You get more of a west to east flow. The polar front jet stream is pretty much west to east. And of course, the polar front generally is going to be parallel with the polar front jet stream. So much milder air with a positive Arctic Oscillation. Okay. So big differences between negative versus positive. So let's take a look at the models tonight. The European Deterministic Ao Forecast. Okay. Look at the white circled lines. And notice that the forecast between today, 8 January, and out to about 18 January for the next 10 days, you'll notice that the forecast for the Arctic Oscillation is it's going to remain negative, according to the European Deterministic Model. So we'd expect cold temperatures with a negative Arctic Oscillation across the eastern U.S. through the 18th of January. What about the European Ensemble Prediction System, EPS? 50 perturbed members, 15-day forecast out through the 23rd of January. Notice the green line here, that's the average, the ensemble mean of all the members. There's 50 members in this particular ensemble model, and notice the green line is the average of all those members. And we stay, again, in negative territory, according to this model, out through the 23rd of January. That would equate to colder temperatures in the east. The European EPS AO 50 perturbed members, this one goes out 46 days now, this particular ensemble. This goes all the way out to about the 22nd of February. And again, notice the green line. Another thing I want you to notice about this model, or I want you to know about the model, is it has a positive tendency in the longer range. Beyond 30 days, this model tends to always wants to inflate the AO. The same thing with the NAO. It wants to inflate it to the positive side. Now, look at the forecast. Negative AO all the way out through about the 3rd of February, early February, according to this model. And it eventually transitions to neutral conditions around the 4th of February, and it maintains that through the 22nd of February. Moving ahead now to the Gfs Deterministic Ao Forecast. And look at the white circled line there. That's the forecast from today's date, the 8th of January, 2021, all the way out through about, this one runs about to the 25th or so, 16-day forecast. And you'll notice this particular model, this was the 060 run from this morning on the GFS model. Things have changed since then, since this was issued. I have looked at the more recent runs, and it keeps it negative the whole time now. So you'd expect cold temperatures at a minimum through the 22nd of January based on the negative AO. And then finally, the NCEP Gfs V12 AO. This is 30 perturbed members in this ensemble. The green line, again, represents the average, the ensemble average of all those 30 members, showing, again, a negative trend to the Arctic Oscillation through the 24th of January. So, Arctic Oscillation remaining negative. Really no change to that, even from last week's video that I did. So that indicates cold temperatures in the eastern United States. Moving ahead to the North Atlantic Oscillation, just like with the AO, the NAO has both a positive and negative phase, and you'll notice the differences here in the jet stream, the solid dark line, how with a positive NAO you get more of a west to east polar front jet stream, and you get milder temperatures across the mid-Atlantic and southeastern U.S. Whereas with a negative NAO phase, which we've been in quite some time now, you get more of a higher upper-level ridge and blocking into Greenland, and sometimes that can extend even further northwestward into Baffin Bay and over towards Canada. But regardless, the negative NAO phase generally results in a deep trough in the eastern United States and stormy and colder conditions. So here's the forecasts. Looking at the European Deterministic Ao Forecast, out to 10 days, and this one runs out to about the 18th of January, showing the white circle line there, showing a negative trend to the North Atlantic Oscillation, and that is showing up in the models actually, and it has been. It's showing this huge ridge that's been building. It's maintained its persistence into Greenland and into parts of Canada as well, eastern Canada. And so we see no changes to that. As far as the European EPS, NAO 50 perturbed members, this is the forecast out 15 days, out to the 23rd of January. Negative NAO. So again, that would indicate that trough in the eastern United States, the blocking continuing in the North Atlantic, and what do you get? Colder than normal temperatures and a stormier period along the east coast. European EPS, NAO 50 perturbed members, this is the 46-day forecast. And notice the green line, the ensemble average, showing a negative trend to the NAO on this model. It does occasionally get close to neutral around the 26th of January, around the 8th of February, around the 16th of February. And so, we might go from negative, according to this model, to more neutral type conditions beyond the 26th of January. So it's interesting to watch the different trends of the model. And then this is the Gfs Deterministic Nao Forecast. And look at the white circle line and how the NAO is sharply negative today on the 8th of January. You see more of a rising tendency towards that zero line in the middle of the graph around the 14th of January. And again, right around neutral, around the 22nd of January for the NAO forecast. And then moving on to NCEP Gfs V12 NAO, 30 perturbed members, 16-day forecast out to the 24th of January. Negative NAO is going to be existing through the 23rd of January, and this again is going to yield those colder temps in the eastern United States and that trough. So, just like last week's video, Arctic Oscillation remaining negative as well as the North Atlantic Oscillation. Now what about the Pacific North American forecast? With this particular teleconnection, with a positive PNA, that would be on the bottom left. You get increased chances of below normal temperatures in a trough in the eastern United States. That polar front jet tends to form a ridge, higher heights out west, and a deepening trough downstream from that ridge. And that results in below normal temperatures in the eastern U.S. and above normal temperatures in the western U.S. On the other hand, with a negative Pacific North American pattern, you get increased chances of above normal temperatures across the eastern U.S. with more of a ridge building. And you get below normal temperatures with a trough now in the west. It's almost like a flip-flop situation, right, with the jet stream. All right, so let's take a look at this teleconnection forecast. Showing European deterministic. See the white lines there? That's your forecast, the white circular line. Positive PNA, according to this model, through about the 19th of January. Then it starts to transition to neutral. The European EPS, PNA, 50 perturbed members, forecast out to 15 days. On out to the 23rd of January. Notice the positive trend in the green line, okay, above that zero line there, positive 2, and that runs positive all the way out through about the 18th to the 19th of January. That will transition to a negative phase after 19 January, according to this model. The PNA will go negative. European EPS PNA 50 perturbed members, 46-day forecast. A little bit longer range here, out through about the 22nd of February, showing a positive PNA all the way through about the 19th of January. Very similar among the models. Transitioning to negative PNA after 19 January. If you look at the green line, we tend to go below the zero line into negative territory with the PNA. And then Gfs Deterministic PNA forecast, showing the white circle line there. That's our forecast line, keeping a positive PNA right on through about the 17th of January, a little bit earlier here with the Gfs Deterministic, transitioning to negative PNA after the 17th of January. Finally, the Gfs, NCEP Gfs V12, PNA 30 perturbed members, 16-day forecast out 24 January, positive phase of the PNA right on through the 19th of January, then transitioning to negative PNA after the 19th. So, what have we gleaned from the PNA forecast? Most of the models are predicting at the current time that the PNA will stay positive through about the 19th of January and then possibly transition to a neutral or even negative phase of this teleconnection after the 19th of January. So we need to keep an eye on that, okay? Because that could change, that could attempt to change the configuration of the polar front jet stream. Now on to the Eastern Pacific Oscillation Forecast, EPO. Now EPO is a big player for us, and the reason is because the weather generally moves from west to east in the mid-latitudes where we live here in the United States. So between 30 and 60 degrees latitude, you get more of a westerly wind regime. And with that, you got to pay attention to what's known as upstream locations, such as the Pacific Ocean. And with the EPO, the graphic on the left shows a negative EPO, and the graphic on the right shows the pressure patterns for a positive EPO. Now, with a negative EPO on the left, you get this nice sprawling ridge of high pressure and warm air aloft over the northeastern Pacific into the Gulf of Alaska. And if it builds high enough or far enough north, Siberian air will then cross the pole, and this is known as cross-polar flow with a negative EPO. So the air, that very cold Arctic air, actually will move from Siberia on across over to the North American continent. And so that's something we really keep an eye on in the wintertime. Also with the negative EPO, you get the higher atmospheric heights and pressures and temperatures in the Northeast Pacific and Alaska. It's much warmer than normal in Alaska with that ridge building in. And yeah, it favors the warm weather in Alaska and is a cold pattern for most of the lower 48 with a negative EPO. All right, now the positive EPO on the right, a little bit of a difference. Look at the Pacific Ocean. We have a large and persistent storm now, or low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, with a strong jet stream between that particular low pressure area and a strong subtropical high down towards more tropical latitudes in the vicinity of Hawaii, for example, around 21 degrees north latitude. And so you get more of a that deep trough, or that strong low pressure that we call it the Aleutian Low in the vicinity of the Aleutian Islands, tends to pump in a lot more milder Pacific air with its counterclockwise circulation. That mild air then flows in to western Canada. It flows into the lower 48 as well from coast to coast. So a positive EPO means it's projected to be mild pretty much from west to east coast. So let's take a look at the forecast for the EPO. European Deterministic today showing a, this thing was pretty positive. If you look at the blue line, back on around the 4th of January, the EPO was above positive 4, so very strongly positive. But now you're noticing the white circled line and how it's coming down towards neutral conditions. By around the 10th of January, it's coming down towards neutral EPO phase. And then it kind of goes back up to positive again to a value of positive 3. Then it comes back down again around mid-January. Then it goes back up again. So there's a lot of battle going on in the Gulf of Alaska as far as pressure systems go, whether there'll be a upper level ridge or whether there'll be a lower pressure, a trough in that area. Looking at the European EPO, 50 perturbed members, this is the 15-day forecast. The green ensemble average line there, showing positive EPO, really all the way through about, it looks to be on this chart about the 22nd of January. So, and then it becomes more neutral in that case. So positive EPO, again, favors warmer temperatures, not only across the East U.S., but across the entire North American continent in the United States. Additionally, the European EPS 50% members 46-day forecast out to 22 February. Look at the green line, that's the ensemble average. Notice the green line again, it's positive, and then it kind of comes down to neutral around the 17th, 18th of January. It remains neutral through about the 24th of January, then goes back positive again after that. The Gfs Deterministic Epo Forecast, and this one is off the 060 run today on the 8th of January, showing the EPO is coming down from a pretty strongly positive phase to more of a neutral phase around the 10th of January, back up again, and then back down again, back up again, and it's like a roller coaster, right? So this one's kind of all over the place, the Gfs Deterministic for the EPO, and the NCEP Gfs V12 EPO 30% members, 16-day forecast out to about the 24th of January. Notice how positive the EPO is right on through to about between the 14th and 15th of January, mid-month. Comes up a little bit positive, but then it drops down into negative territory. Now, if this model were to verify, that would definitely help. That would be more of a cold signal for the United States as a whole. Now, what about the polar vortex? And this is one intriguing subject this winter. The graphic on the left, let me just get to the graphics first. The graphic on the left, that's showing the stretched out or elongated look. Blue shading represents the coldest temperatures in the stratosphere, and then the yellow colors indicate the warmest temperatures in the stratosphere. And you're looking at the yellow shading on these graphics, and that the brighter yellow shading, it represents temperatures at -40 to -45 degrees Celsius. And you're thinking, whoa, that's cold. Well, yeah, it is cold, but for locations such as the stratosphere, where you're farther removed from the Earth's surface, you tend to be much colder as you go up in the atmosphere. So when you see yellow, that generally indicates warming conditions, warmer temperatures in the stratosphere. You see blue, that's colder temperatures in the stratosphere. The white solid lines on these graphics represent the geopotential height in meters. That's at 30 hectopascals, at 30 millibar level. And so on the graphic on the left, you can see kind of the white solid lines and how they're kind of stretched out. It almost appears they're almost like elongated, right? And you got bluer colors, the colder temperatures, removed off the pole to the east. Meanwhile, you have those yellow shading, the graphic on the left, trying to just take over the North Pole. If you look at the graphic on the right, wow, what a difference, right? If you compare the two. So the graphic on the left is today, the 8th of January, 2021. The graphic on the right is the 23rd of January, 2021. And you can see the difference. Good potential there for a split. There's still potential for a split with the polar vortex. And it's just definitely going to be displaced off the North Pole. And so this could have very significant consequences for our tropospheric temperatures. The troposphere, the layer of the Earth where we live in, from the surface on up. And so we could have some big changes coming as far as the jet stream configuration and the pattern. All right, so big changes with the polar vortex. That's another major factor into the upcoming forecasts. Now, the models they really have a hard time trying to determine, with the polar vortex splitting or displaced, really what's ultimately going to happen. So we just got to keep an eye on this. In a lot of cases from research, with a displaced polar vortex, the coldest air ends up in the eastern United States. But that's not always the case. And again, I've cautioned this on previous videos that no two polar vortex displacements or splits are ever alike. So use that as a word of caution. So let's look at the final thoughts based on the teleconnections today on 8 January 2021. The Mjo oscillation, the MJO, is currently in the null phase and towards a weaker phase 3. That's the forecast through the 22nd of January. And again, if you go back to the chart, the temperature composites, which shows the temperature departures, you'll notice for the MJO that phase 3, look at the graphic on the left, phase 3, the blue shadings below normal or colder temperatures, that is across the whole United States. So if we're in phase 3, as the forecast indicates, we have cold pretty much stretched from the northern plains all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Okay, So phase 3 is not a warm phase, is what I'm getting at. It's a colder phase. All right. So we have a null phase to a weak MJO phase 3. That's going to indicate colder temperatures across the eastern United States. La Nina conditions, they continue to exist across the equatorial eastern Pacific. Water temperatures currently running minus 0.99 degrees Celsius below normal in the Nino 3.4 region. So basically, if you want to round off, you're looking at about a degree Celsius below normal in that Nino 3.4 region. Again, as I mentioned, that is on the border between a weak versus a moderate La Nina. So again, I go back to the beginning of the winter in the forecast, and it appeared all the climate models were indicating or hinting at the possibility of a much stronger La Nina this winter. Well, that doesn't look like it's going to happen. So we're looking at mild temperatures in the eastern U.S., the mid-Atlantic, during a La Nina phase normally. And we would still expect that. We still can't downplay the fact that we do have the La Nina going on. But we do expect more of a minimal impact on the U.S. temps over the next 2 weeks due to that weakly moderate La Nina. Now, if this was a strong La Nina, this would be a whole different discussion, a whole different story. We'd probably be set up with more of troughing in the Pacific Northwest and more of a ridge off the southeast coast and milder temperatures in the mid-Atlantic. But it is a weakly moderate La Nina. Now, models are also indicating that negative trend in the AO to continue through the 22nd of January. Over the next 2 weeks, that would correlate to colder temperatures in the east. Models indicating that negative trend in the North Atlantic Oscillation NAO through 22 January. Again, cold temperatures in the eastern U.S. We got the high latitude blocking showing up on the ensemble model still into Greenland and moving its way, working its way towards the west-northwest into parts of Canada and to the higher latitudes. So this sets up a trough in the east typically and more of an ideal east coast storm track. Now, what's happened this past week is some of these storms, they get suppressed further south because with a negative NAO, that strong upper level ridge, areas of low pressure are going to take the path of least resistance. And that path of least resistance is away from upper level ridges. And so with a negative NAO, we got the upper level ridge built into Greenland. These storms tend to remain suppressed and mainly impact the mid-Atlantic. And then these storm systems generally tend to move off to the east and out underneath the ridge, further south than normal. So it's more of an ideal winter storm track for especially the mid-Atlantic portion of the East Coast. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out in the coming weeks. Models are indicating a positive Pacific North American pattern through 19 January. That's going to favor the continuation of troughing in the eastern U.S. And this will result in cold temps across the eastern U.S., below normal temps. And then there's signs that this PNA might trend towards neutral conditions after 19 January. Most of the models are indicating that today, which means that would favor neither a trough nor a ridge in the eastern U.S. That would favor a more zonal west-to-east jet stream from the west to the east coast if the PNA does in fact go to a neutral state. Models are indicating a positive to neutral trend in the EPO through 22 January. With a positive trend to the EPO, you get mild temperatures not only across the eastern U.S., but pretty much the whole U.S. That would then, if it goes to more of a neutral trend for the EPO, that would result in more of a west-east zonal jet stream. That would equate to more near-average temperatures. Additionally, the models are indicating a splitting displaced polar vortex through the end of January. Now, this favors colder temperatures in the eastern U.S., repetitive shots of Arctic, waves of Arctic air moving in the latter part of January and early February. Now, the models are really starting to latch on to this possibility. I've been watching the last couple days, and you're starting to see this, where especially starting next weekend, the 16th of January, the Martin Luther King weekend, you're starting to see more of a deepening trough in the eastern U.S., and then you get these quick little breaks before another surge of very cold Arctic air spills in, and that trough gets reinforced. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that because that's going to be a big player here as we move towards the end of January. The overall assessment based on all these teleconnections for tonight, the upcoming forecast period overall is going to feature a variety of teleconnections that are going to impact our weather. These include that polar vortex displacement or splitting, the La Nina, that continues to be in a weakly moderate state, so I'm not really anticipating very strong feedback or impacts with the La Nina being in that weakened state for our temperatures in the U.S. over the next 2 weeks. The Mjo Oscillation Forecast is for a weak phase 3 ultimately, and as I showed you on those temperature composites, when we were talking about MJO, it favors colder temperatures, not only across the eastern U.S., but the whole country, the whole U.S. The Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation, AO, NAO, continue to remain negative over the next 2 weeks. That's going to continue to favor colder temperatures across the east. Meanwhile, that Pacific North American pattern is positive. That's going to indicate colder temperatures, rising heights out in the western U.S. and in western Canada, even possibly as if they build high enough up into Alaska, and that tends to discharge colder air towards the eastern U.S. And the models are showing that period around mid-January of very high heights and a very strong positive PNA showing up with a downstream deepening trough. But that PNA may trend to neutral and negative by the third week of January. And if that were to occur, we could see a redistribution of colder temperatures, not only in the eastern U.S., but we may see more colder air moving in to the western U.S. as well. So that's something to keep an eye on. Very rare do you have the whole United States dominated by below normal temperatures. The Eastern Pacific Oscillation, EPO, has been positive, but is expected to trend neutral over the next 2 weeks, which should limit the Pacific influence, okay? Meanwhile, we got the stratospheric warming. Now that is occurring over the North Pole with that highly displaced polar vortex. Right now, the models are having a struggling time. I think they're starting to come in better alignment, though, in 7 days from now. We're starting to see that pattern change 7 days from now, around the 16th of January and beyond. That period, 16 January to about the 26th of January, it looks very cold in the eastern U.S., and I think it's a combination of things. One of the things would be the polar vortex, the negative North Atlantic Oscillation, as well as a negative Arctic Oscillation. In addition, the MJO being in a weak phase 3. So as a result, the models, they're going to kind of go back and forth from model run to model run. So you might see some differences, but I think the overall pattern, especially 7 days out, again, is starting to come in line with a pattern change with much colder temperatures and Arctic air spilling into the eastern U.S. All right. Some models also, for the vortex, by the way, with the splitting vortex, some models show one of the vortex, one of the cold lobes of the coldest lobe of air over Eurasia, while other models show the coldest lobe of air over eastern North America. So this is a real battle. This is a highly dynamic situation. So just wanted to point that out in tonight's video. So we should expect model volatility to continue from run to run. As we get closer towards late January, I imagine these models are going to come into better agreement and be able to pick up on the anomalous behavior of the polar vortex. So the overall pattern, based on everything we talked about tonight, here's the bottom line. The overall pattern remains favorable for a cold, stormy weather across the eastern U.S. through the 22nd of January for the next 2 weeks. Again, everything's pointing that way. Outside of the weaker La Nina as well as the positive EPO, those are the two right now that are resisting. As I mentioned last week's video, the Mjo oscillation has been silent, very inactive in null phases for quite some time. Now, there are some hints later down the line that the MJO could wake up, and it could wake up and go into a warmer phase, phase 4. And that would favor more of a building ridge along the southeast coast. I did share some images today on the social media and showed how the southeast ridge in the longer range forecast is flattened pretty good. And so this is going to be one heck of a battle between teleconnections, I'll be honest. If MJO comes on, it could try to really change the cold outlook for the eastern U.S. I don't anticipate La Nina doing a lot of changing the rest of the winter. I think it's going to stay pretty much where it is, or maybe even a little slight warming in that Nino 3.4 region. For the AO and the NAO, I look for the NAO, that blocking to continue in the North Atlantic. There's really no sign of that ending anytime soon. So we're going to have that going for us if you like winter weather in the east. And the positive PNA, what happens over time with the Pacific North American pattern? Does it go sharply negative towards the last week of January? Because then that's going to be another resistance to cold in the east. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. That polar vortex, where does the splitting polar vortex, where do those lobes end up? And where do those direct the coldest air to filter into? Again, research has shown a persistent trough in the eastern U.S. after these polar vortex disruptions and displacements. But, you know, no two vortex displacements are ever alike. So real interesting stuff going on right now. Thank you so much for watching tonight. I'm fired up about things, especially as a winter weather enthusiast here in the Mid-Atlantic. I think there's good opportunity in between cold surges, really cold Arctic surges. There's opportunities. We could get waves of low pressure to form along the baroclinic zone, around that boundary between, you know, when the air is trying to get mild, the mild air is trying to fight back, and you get these breaks in the Arctic surges before another reinforcing Arctic surge comes down from Canada. I think you get waves of low pressure to form along these boundaries, these sharp temperature contrast boundaries. And I see with the strong block in place at North Atlantic Oscillation, if that remains strong, I feel that the Mid-Atlantic is going to get quite a few winter storm threats over the next 2 weeks. Now, if that North Atlantic Oscillation goes a little bit closer to neutral, then we could be talking something different. If the block's not as strong in the North Atlantic, we may see more of a cutter situation, where low pressure forms around the Gulf Coast and moves up along the spine of the Appalachians, or we could be looking at low pressure moving up the East Coast all the way up into New England as well. So a lot of interesting things going on in the atmosphere. Thank you so much for watching. If there's any storm threats upcoming for winter weather across Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic, I'll go ahead and make a special video. But as of right now, we're sitting with the cold rain at 39 degrees tonight in Virginia Beach. It's not very warm at all here. And we got another system coming in on Tuesday. Tuesday, which is the 12th of January. That looks like it's all rain again because we have marginally cold air in place. But then after that, I think then the pattern is going to get really cold. And if we can get these waves of low pressure, these storm systems to kind of form along these major temperature contrast boundaries, I think the Mid-Atlantic has a good shot of at least a couple winter weather threats in late January. Right, that wraps things up. It's Spot On Weather. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. We appreciate it. We love to share the weather. We hope that these videos are educational for you as far as the teleconnections and their impact on the United States weather during the winter season. All right, take care, everybody. I hope everybody stays safe and warm as well as healthy. Spot On Weather. If we're not spot on, we're not doing it right. Take care and have a great evening, everybody.